Hey everybody, welcome back to Workshop Wednesdays. This is our series on technical design. So we are taking you through the various phases of a tech pack. So we're going to do the next two sessions in two parts. We're going to be talking about callouts. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the callouts are and why it is that we do them. Because what we've already done, we've talked about the cover sheet, we've talked about the inspiration, kind of how you're introducing the style to your factory and what kinds of things that you're going to ask them to do for you. So it's really important that we get a chance to start describing some of the particular details of the style alongside of our technical sketches. So some people will draw by hand, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you really need to be very precise with your technical drawing if you're drawing by hand. A lot of designers are using Adobe Illustrator, which I highly recommend, to be able to draw a proportionate sketch that allows all of the details to be clearly seen. Whenever there's an update or something that needs to be changed to a style, a quick correction, a keystroke or two, and you've been able to make the correction pretty seamlessly. So what we want to be able to do is to make sure that every time we communicate with our factory, the technical designer wants to make sure they have the most accurate representation of the style that we want to see. And so the callouts help us do this. So if we're flipping through a book, really that package of information that we're sharing with the factory, we're always going to include the key information that we've talked about before: the style number, the style description, what season it's for, when the product needs to be delivered by. These are all things that kind of make sure that all of our partners stay on task and are able to complete their portion in time in order for the product to be delivered as requested. This is really important. And so something that the technical designer will do is they won't just, provide this information and then never connect or speak with the factory again. They are responsible for continuing that communication through a variety of iterations, corrections, emails. It may be a convergence where they're speaking to one another inside of the product lifecycle management software platform. And it's an opportunity to make sure that the product comes back right. The person who does this role as a technical designer is so, so important because they are really the gatekeeper for how much this product development process costs. The more mistakes that are made, the more expensive it becomes. The more samples that are required, the more expensive it becomes. The more iterations, fixes, changes that happen, the longer your timeline will become. And so getting it right and being as specific as possible up front is key. So that's why we do our call outs. So I'm going to show you what callouts look like. I'm going to show it to you in a couple of different ways. So we may run out of time as I walk through the first way, which is why we need to do callouts part 2. So if you've been working in our business, you've probably worked in a variety of ways this way. If you're seeing this for the first time, welcome to callouts. This is something that I actually learned as an assistant designer when I was at American Eagle Outfitters. I learned how to tech pack when I was in design school, or the concept or the idea of tech packing, but I didn't really understand how to create meaningful communication with my factory until I started working with an actual company, with a brand. And so I'm going to give you a window into which you would typically only learn if you're working for a significant company, like some of the ones that I've worked for. And what I'll do is I'll kind of show you some of the snippets of what some of the key components are to doing an excellent call out page. So I'm going to share with you my screen here. And this is actually a style that I developed for my brand. We were working on a particular capsule collection where we wanted to create a new trench coat. And so it had some of the styling details that had been incorporated into a particular style that I had done that was sleeveless and didn't have as many of these details. So this is like the true trench coat version of that style. So you can see that my sketch was done in Illustrator. So I sketched these things in the Adobe Illustrator program. And I had, all the little details that I wanted, the ends on the tie, the angle of the storm vent, and the one across the back here saw that I have like a little pitch that was intentional. What the stitching needed to look like, the epaulettes on the shoulder, and kind of the evidence of a bit more constructed, sculpted shoulders through the jacket. So it looks like it's not falling flat. I showed that I wanted a little bit of ease through the waist. And so that was really important to communicate. and that the jacket fell a little bit away from the body. So you can kind of see how these things are being communicated through the style. One of the other things that you'll probably notice is that there's a slightly darker line here. And so that kind of indicates that there may be an opening, although there's top stitching visible. And so whenever I go to my call outs, what I do here is this is where I start to explain to the factory what it is that I've sketched and how important it is for them to understand um, exactly what is meant. There's certain lines that don't get described because they're stylistic. That may be things like this, where it looks like there's just like a little bit of movement from the back shoulder, or maybe there's just like a bit of undulation of the fabric in the sleeve, or maybe it's just a little bit of the gather that happens whenever you tie the belt across the waist. But this doesn't indicate how the pattern should be. I don't want there to be a big bump at the waist whenever you lay the jacket flat. So there's certain things that will get described, and there are other things that will get communicated as the aesthetic or the feeling of the garment, as opposed to the specific design details. I will tell you that I have seen some factories literally place a seam that goes nowhere in the middle of an arm, in the middle of a sleeve. And because it wasn't clearly stated as feeling, or if this line was too heavy, it would have appeared to be a seam as opposed to it being clear that it was not a seam. So these are some of the things that you'll want to kind of take note of whenever you do your sketching. You don't want to go too crazy with all of these little feeling lines. But what I do is I make sure that every single stitch that I do want articulated gets called out correctly. So that's why we call them call outs. We're calling out all of our details. I start all my call outs with a bit of a explanation at the top. I do it in red so that it stands out so that people can see what we're going for. I'll say all seam allowances are marrow clean finish unless otherwise noted. The jacket has defined waist shape and the jacket is fully lined. So this gives them a lot of information up front, that there should be facings, that there's some waist shape to the jacket so the pattern doesn't come back completely straight up and down. How the seams should be finished, because since it's lined, I don't need there to be French seams or special seaming on the inside of the jacket, because it's all going to get covered up with lining. So they can use kind of a quick finish tool as opposed to a much more labor intensive tool if those seams were going to be exposed on the inside of the jacket. So this is all very important information for the factory to know what they could expect in terms of how much they should be charging for the labor. More complicated seam work, more beautiful seam work, consistent seam work is going to be much more expensive than maybe something that's lined and can kind of take a quick pass through one of the machines that has a simple finishing, like the Marrow. I go through every single portion of this garment. It's so important for us to be able to keep track of what's happening with the various styles, in addition to all the details that we communicate. And so I try to aim for a level of consistency in the stitches. If I go for a 1/4 inch SNTS, I'm here, guys, on the 2-ply front yoke. A 1/4 inch SNTS is a single needle top stitch. And so I'm telling them exactly how far away from the seam line I want the stitch line and whether I want a single needle or a double needle top stitch, so that I can see that detail reflected here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more so that you can see. I think that's a little bit better. So let's go back to that 2-ply front yoke. So you can see here this comment, 2-ply front yoke, and this is referring to this pattern piece here. I tell them that I want a 1 1/4 inch single needle top stitch, SNTS for short. And so this is something that we'll use to be able to describe what the stitch package should appear on the garment. So because I'm using, and I call it stitch package, meaning what is my formula for stitches? I don't want to put a single needle 1/4 inch here. I don't want to put a single 1/8 inch over here and then do a 1/2 inch on the other side. Typically what I'll want to do is to commit to a particular width away from the seam line so that it looks like my garment belongs in the same style. I'll also consider doing this across the collection so that everything appears to belong to the same brand, same feeling. So these are all things that help communicate the style. The only difference where I may make a variation is in details that get echoed in the style. So this is a bit more, let's say it may be a little bit more advanced, but I think you guys can handle it. So for something like a slant that's getting echoed from the top of the garment to the bottom of the garment, I may decide that this particular stitch line is going to get a 3/4 inch single needle. And so I'll do the same thing for the pocket instead of having a bunch of different ones. This may be my one time where I may make an exception for how the top stitches should appear. The center front placket, because of all of the closure constructions that are hidden within it, I'll need to kind of look at, okay, do I have snaps in here? Are they or zippers only? What are the pieces that are a part of this jacketed construction? The collar stand, every little detail gets called out. I think that we're probably going to wind up losing some time on getting a chance to share all of these with you. But the core message on this, guys, is really about having clean, simple language, sometimes abbreviated, that helps the factory to understand what does this picture mean and what kind of machine do I need to employ in order to execute this style. If I have snaps, I want to tell them what size my snaps are. If I have a zipper, I want to tell them how heavy the zipper is. We measure zippers in terms of gauges and what that zipper construction is, whether it's a one-way zipper or a two-way zipper. That means that it zips from the top and from the bottom. We use some additional information regarding how we want the hem to be finished. And so these are very specific, but the cleaner, the more simple that you can describe it, the better. The last thing I'm going to say about this today, guys, is that whenever you look at this, you see that I'm using these wands here, wands like almost like a magic wand, to point to various elements. I particularly like using these because it's actually more precise to get a chance to point out exactly what it is that you're referring to. Sometimes whenever you use, I'll show you a different, when we do call outs too, I'll show you a different method of doing these that works for some styles, but for some others, it may be a bit of a challenge to see all those details clearly. But the wands are really important to be able to pinpoint exactly which elements you're speaking of, and that way all of these comments that we've made about this garment and how it comes together are much more clearly articulated, and they know exactly which piece of the garment you're speaking of. So I'm going to stop sharing here today. This is really the beginning of our two-part series on callouts. It is such an in-depth component to what it is that we do. And so I showed you what it looked like if you were to do all of your callouts in Illustrator. But the next time we get together, I'm going to show you what that looks like in Unique PLM. So I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's part of our Gerber Technology Suite that we have here at the ACC Fashion Incubator. And I look forward to getting a chance to share that with you here in just a moment. So we'll see you guys next week, and enjoy your week.